Every single day, millions of people look in the mirror and notice the same frustrating pattern. Dark patches slowly spreading across the face, brown spots appearing on the hands, and uneven pigmentation forming around the neck. It doesn't happen overnight. It starts small, one spot, then another, then more, until you stop counting. Most people respond the same way. They try creams, home remedies, expensive treatments, hoping something will work, but nothing truly changes. Eventually, they ask a professional and receive the same simple answer. It's just aging. But that answer is incomplete. These spots are not simply a natural consequence of getting older. They are a signal that something deeper inside the body is not functioning in balance. And here's the important part: when a process can be identified, it can also be corrected. This means the situation is not permanent. It is not something you have to accept. The key is understanding what your body is actually telling you. Because once you shift your focus from surface treatment to internal cause, everything begins to change. To understand why these dark spots form, you need to look beneath the surface of your skin. Deep within the skin are specialized cells responsible for producing pigment. These cells create melanin, the substance that gives your skin its color. When your body is functioning in balance, melanin is distributed evenly, creating a smooth and consistent skin tone. But when certain internal processes become disrupted, these cells stop working in a coordinated way. Some areas begin producing excess pigment, while others remain unchanged. This imbalance results in concentrated patches of darker skin. The critical point here is that these cells are not failing randomly. They are reacting to signals coming from within your body. That means the root of the issue is not on the surface, it is internal. And when internal signals change, the behavior of these cells changes as well. This is why focusing only on external treatments often leads to disappointment. The surface reflects what is happening inside. Most people believe that dark spots are caused entirely by sun exposure. While sunlight does play a role, it is not the full explanation. The sun acts as a trigger, but it is not the root cause. For any visible change to occur, there must already be an underlying imbalance. Think of sunlight as something that reveals a problem, not something that creates it on its own. If your internal systems are functioning properly, your skin can handle sun exposure much more effectively. But when internal balance is disrupted, even minimal exposure can lead to noticeable pigmentation changes. This is why some people see spots worsen even during seasons with limited sunlight. They focus on protecting their skin from the outside, while the real issue continues to develop internally. Understanding this difference is important because it shifts your approach from protection alone to correction. One of the most overlooked contributors to uneven pigmentation is the liver. This organ is responsible for processing and filtering substances that enter your body. Every day, it works continuously to neutralize and eliminate unwanted compounds. When functioning efficiently, this system maintains balance. But when the workload becomes too high or efficiency decreases, the body must adapt. Instead of processing everything through its primary pathways, it begins to distribute the load elsewhere. One of those alternative pathways is the skin. The skin is not just a protective layer, it also participates in elimination processes. When the internal filtration system is under pressure, the skin begins handling part of that burden. This creates an environment where skin cells are exposed to substances they are not meant to process. As a result, the cells responsible for pigmentation begin reacting irregularly. This leads to uneven distribution of pigment, particularly in areas where the skin is thinner and more sensitive. This is why so many treatments fail to deliver lasting results. When you apply creams or external solutions, you are addressing the visible effect, not the underlying cause. It may create temporary improvement, but the internal process continues unchanged. Over time, the spots return or become more noticeable. The situation is similar to trying to fix a problem without addressing its source. The visible layer may improve briefly, but the underlying imbalance remains. Lasting change requires shifting attention to the systems that influence skin function from within. When internal processes begin to stabilize, the need for external correction decreases naturally. The skin starts to reflect that internal balance. This is where real improvement begins, not by forcing change on the surface, but by creating the conditions that allow your body to restore itself. To understand why pigmentation becomes uneven, you need to look at how your body processes internal waste. Every single day, substances enter your system through food, air, and water. Your body has a primary filtration system designed to neutralize and remove these substances efficiently. When this system is functioning properly, balance is maintained and unwanted compounds are eliminated without affecting other processes. But when the workload increases beyond what the system can handle, the body adapts. It begins redistributing part of that burden to secondary pathways. One of those pathways is the skin. The skin is not just a surface layer, it participates in elimination when internal systems are under strain. This creates a situation where skin cells are exposed to substances that can disrupt their normal function. When this happens, the cells responsible for pigment production become unstable. Instead of distributing pigment evenly, they begin producing it in concentrated areas. This leads to visible dark patches. The important point is that this process does not begin on the surface. It begins internally, long before any visible changes appear. As the body ages, the efficiency of internal systems naturally declines. This includes the ability to filter and process substances effectively, blood flow to key organs becomes slower, and overall metabolic activity decreases. This does not happen suddenly, but gradually over time. The result is that the same level of exposure to everyday substances creates a greater impact than it did before. The system becomes less efficient at maintaining balance. This is why pigmentation changes often become more noticeable after a certain age. It is not simply because of time passing, it is because the processes that maintain internal stability are no longer working at the same level. The body is still functioning, but it requires more support to maintain the same results. Understanding this shift is important because it explains why solutions that worked in the past may no longer be effective. The approach needs to adapt to the body's current condition, not its previous state. Improving internal balance does not require complicated or expensive solutions. In many cases, simple daily habits can significantly reduce the strain placed on the body's filtration system. One of the most effective approaches is supporting the natural flow of digestive processes. When digestion is functioning properly, the body is able to process and eliminate substances more efficiently. This reduces the burden placed on secondary pathways like the skin. Small changes, such as starting the day with hydration and incorporating foods that support digestion, can create noticeable improvements over time. The goal is not to force the body to change, but to create conditions where it can function more effectively on its own. When internal systems begin to operate more efficiently, the signals sent to skin cells also change. This leads to more stable and balanced pigment production. Another major factor that influences pigmentation is the condition of your digestive system. Inside your body exists a complex ecosystem made up of beneficial bacteria. These microorganisms play a critical role in regulating inflammation, supporting immune function, and maintaining overall balance. When this system is stable, it protects the body from unnecessary internal stress. But when it becomes disrupted, the effects spread beyond digestion. The body enters a state of low-level inflammation. This inflammation is not always noticeable, but it affects how cells function throughout the body. Skin cells are particularly sensitive to these changes. When exposed to ongoing internal stress signals, they begin to behave irregularly. This includes the cells responsible for pigment production. As a result, pigmentation becomes uneven and concentrated in specific areas. This connection between internal balance and skin condition is often overlooked, but it is one of the most important factors to address. At the center of these processes is something that is rarely discussed openly: chronic internal inflammation. This is not the kind of inflammation that causes pain or visible symptoms. It is subtle, ongoing, and often unnoticed, but its effects are significant. It disrupts normal cellular behavior, interferes with communication between systems, and creates an environment where imbalance becomes the norm. When skin cells are constantly exposed to these signals, they lose their ability to function in a coordinated way. This leads to irregular pigment production and the formation of dark spots. The important thing to understand is that this type of inflammation is not random. It is the result of repeated daily patterns. And because it develops gradually, it can also be reduced gradually through consistent changes. Addressing this hidden factor is one of the most effective ways to restore balance and improve overall skin appearance. Once you understand that internal imbalance is driving pigmentation, the next step is restoring stability to the system that controls it. One of the most effective ways to do this is by supporting the balance of beneficial bacteria inside your body. These microorganisms regulate inflammation, strengthen internal barriers, and help maintain overall stability. When they are present in healthy amounts, they prevent unwanted substances from entering circulation. But when they are reduced, that protection weakens, the body becomes more exposed to internal stress signals, and inflammation begins to increase. Restoring this balance does not require complex solutions. Simple, natural foods can reintroduce beneficial bacteria and support their growth. Fermented foods are particularly effective because they contain live cultures that directly contribute to internal balance. When consumed consistently, they help rebuild the internal environment that supports normal cellular function. Over time, this reduces the signals that cause irregular pigment production. The key is consistency, not intensity. Small daily changes gradually restore stability and reduce the internal stress that affects the skin. Supporting internal balance is not just about adding beneficial elements, it is also about providing the conditions they need to function. Beneficial bacteria rely on specific nutrients to survive and multiply. One of the most important of these is dietary fiber. Fiber acts as a fuel source, allowing these microorganisms to thrive. Without it, even if beneficial bacteria are introduced, they cannot sustain themselves. This is why a balanced intake of natural, unprocessed foods plays a critical role. Along with nutrition, movement is equally important. The body relies on natural motion to maintain internal flow. When movement is limited, processes slow down and internal stagnation begins to develop. This affects digestion, circulation, and overall balance. Even simple daily movement can significantly improve these functions. The goal is not intense activity, but consistent motion that supports natural processes. When both nutrition and movement are aligned, the internal environment becomes more stable, reducing the signals that disrupt skin function. At this point, it becomes important to revisit the role of sunlight with a clearer perspective. Sunlight is often blamed as the primary cause of pigmentation, but in reality, it acts as a trigger rather than the root cause. When light reaches the skin, it signals the body to produce pigment as a protective response. This is a normal function. Balance already exists, this response becomes exaggerated. Instead of producing an even layer of pigment, the cells release it in concentrated areas. This creates visible dark spots. The difference is not the sunlight itself, but how the body responds to it. When internal systems are stable, the response remains controlled and balanced. When they are disrupted, the response becomes irregular. This is why simply avoiding sunlight does not solve the problem. The focus must remain on improving the body's internal ability to respond correctly. The body has natural defense mechanisms designed to protect against environmental stress, including exposure to light. One of the most important of these defenses is antioxidants. These compounds neutralize unstable molecules that can damage cells. When present in sufficient amounts, they help maintain stability within the skin and reduce the impact of external stress. Certain foods naturally contain high levels of these protective compounds. When included regularly in the diet, they strengthen the body's ability to manage exposure and maintain balance. The important factor is not occasional intake, but consistency. Providing the body with a steady supply of supportive nutrients allows it to function more effectively over time. This reduces the likelihood of exaggerated responses that lead to uneven pigmentation. Completely avoiding environmental exposure is not the solution. The body requires a certain level of interaction with its environment to function properly. Controlled exposure supports essential processes, including the production of important nutrients and regulation of internal systems. The key is balance. Too little exposure can create deficiencies, while too much can increase stress. Finding the right level allows the body to maintain stability. When combined with internal support, this balance creates conditions where the body can regulate itself effectively. This is where real improvement begins, not by eliminating factors entirely, but by managing them in a way that supports natural function. There is one factor that quietly affects internal balance without obvious warning signs, and that is vitamin D. Unlike other deficiencies, it does not immediately create noticeable symptoms. There is no sharp discomfort, no clear signal that something is wrong. Instead, it gradually influences how your body functions at a deeper level. Vitamin D plays a role in regulating immune responses, controlling inflammation, and supporting the renewal of skin cells. When levels are insufficient, the body becomes less efficient at maintaining stability. This creates conditions where irregular processes, including uneven pigmentation, are more likely to develop. The challenge is that deficiency becomes more common with age, as the body's ability to produce vitamin D naturally declines. This is not a minor issue, it directly affects how your skin responds to internal and external signals. Supporting vitamin D levels through balanced exposure and nutrition helps restore this internal stability. When the body has what it needs, it can regulate itself more effectively. Among all contributing factors, one stands out as the most underestimated: chronic stress. This is not occasional tension, but the constant mental pressure that becomes part of daily life. When the body remains in a prolonged state of stress, it releases hormones that affect multiple systems simultaneously. These hormones increase internal inflammation, disrupt normal cellular communication, and weaken protective barriers. Over time, this creates an environment where cells no longer function in a coordinated way. The cells responsible for pigmentation become particularly sensitive to these signals. Instead of producing pigment evenly, they begin reacting irregularly. This leads to uneven distribution and visible dark patches. The difficulty is that stress often goes unnoticed because it becomes familiar. It is treated as normal, even though it continuously affects internal balance. Addressing this factor does not require eliminating stress completely, but learning how to reduce its impact on the body. At this stage, it becomes clear that pigmentation is not caused by a single factor. It is the result of multiple systems working together or failing to do so. Internal filtration, digestive balance, nutrient levels, environmental exposure, and stress response all contribute to the final outcome. When even one of these systems becomes unbalanced, it can influence the others. When several are affected at the same time, the impact becomes more visible. This is why focusing on one isolated solution rarely produces lasting results. The body operates as a connected system. Improving overall balance requires addressing each contributing factor in a coordinated way. When internal systems begin to align, the signals sent to skin cells change. This leads to more stable behavior and gradual improvement in appearance. Real change happens through consistency, not intensity. The body responds to repeated patterns over time. When supportive habits are practiced regularly, the system begins to adapt, internal processes become more efficient, and the signals that influence skin behavior stabilize. This does not happen instantly, but it happens reliably. The key is maintaining simple, sustainable actions rather than seeking quick results. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate, leading to visible improvements. The skin becomes more even, more stable, and more reflective of internal balance. This is not forced change, it is a natural response to improved conditions. Your skin is not working against you. It is responding to what is happening inside your body. Dark spots are not random, and they are not something you have to accept without question. They are signals, indicators that internal systems need attention. Once you understand the connection, the approach becomes clear. Instead of focusing only on surface solutions, you begin supporting the processes that control how your skin functions. This shift changes everything, because when the cause is addressed, the result follows naturally. The difference between ongoing frustration and real improvement comes down to awareness and consistent action. So the question is simple: will you continue trying to fix the surface, or will you start working on what's underneath? If this changed your perspective, share it with someone who needs it, and tell me, how long have you been noticing these changes? Your answer might help someone else take the first step.